Welcome to Life Stories. In the heart of Madison Square, a street musician plays his guitar, pouring his soul into every note. But when a gang of bikers arrives, intent on silencing him, the peaceful night takes a dark turn. Just when hope seems lost, an unexpected hero steps forward, someone who knows that true strength isn't just about fighting, but about standing up for what's right. This is a story of resilience, community, and the power of one person's courage to inspire change. Subscribe now to Life Stories and let's begin today's journey. The air in Madison Square carried the warmth of a fading summer day, wrapping the city in a golden glow as people meandered through the lively plaza. I had always loved this place, where the hum of conversation mixed with the scent of street food and the occasional laughter of children chasing one another across the stone-paved walkways. It was a haven of simple joys, a sanctuary where life unfolded in small, beautiful moments. That night, my steps slowed when I heard a melody cutting through the usual city sounds. It wasn't loud or demanding, but something about it commanded attention. A single, soulful tune, played with the kind of emotion that made people pause mid-step, drawn to its honesty. At the center of it all sat Marcus Hayes, an older man with deep lines on his face, evidence of years spent living a life few could understand. His hands, rough yet precise, moved over the strings of his worn guitar, filling the square with a sound that was both haunting and hopeful. His case lay open at his feet, a small sign propped against it, raising money for children's charity. There was something powerful in his presence, something unshakable. Like a man who had learned that dignity wasn't found in riches but in resilience. I stood there, watching, listening, feeling. Around me, others had gathered too. Some tossed a few bills into his case. Others simply nodded in quiet appreciation. It was rare in a place like this for a musician to capture the heart of a crowd. But peace, I've learned, is always fragile. The sound of approaching motorcycles shattered the atmosphere. The growl of engines filled the square as a group of bikers rode in, their presence heavy and intentional. I recognized the shift immediately. The easy smiles disappeared, replaced with wary glances. People edged away, giving the newcomers space. Not out of respect, out of fear. There were 6 of them, their jackets worn and patched with insignias that meant nothing to me but carried weight among those who understood. They moved with the confidence of men who had never been told no and never expected to be challenged. At the head of the group was Travis Red Lawson, a man who had spent years carving out his reputation as someone to be feared. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a beard that did little to hide the cruel smirk stretching across his face. As they dismounted their bikes, his gaze locked onto Marcus. I knew what was coming before a word was spoken. The music faltered for just a second. But Marcus, to his credit, kept playing. It was a small act of defiance. But in that moment, it was everything. Travis sauntered forward, his boots echoing against the stone, stopping just a breath away from the old musician. "Hey, buddy," he drawled, his voice thick with mockery. "You think this is your stage? You think anyone here actually cares about your little songs?" Marcus didn't answer. He just kept playing, his fingers steady despite the tension in the air. Travis chuckled, glancing back at his crew. "Look at this guy," he said, shaking his head, playing his heart out like he's some kind of hero. One of the bikers, Duke, a stocky man with a chain slung around his neck, let out a loud laugh. "Doesn't he know this is our turf?" Another, Ricky, younger and leaner, sneered. "Maybe he thinks he's too good to move." Marcus's hands trembled slightly, but his voice, when he spoke, was calm. "I'm not here to bother anyone. I'm raising money for kids who need help." The way he said it, simple and direct, made it clear he wasn't pleading. He wasn't afraid. He was just stating a fact. Travis snorted. "4 kids. You think you're some kind of saint? Nobody asked for your charity, pal. How about you pack up and leave before we make you?" Silence hung heavy. The crowd watched. But no one stepped forward. I could feel the weight of the moment, the unbearable pressure of knowing something terrible was about to happen and feeling powerless to stop it. The first act of violence was subtle but cruel. Duke kicked the open guitar case, sending the coins and bills scattering across the pavement. Marcus stopped playing. He bent down to pick up what he could. But Travis grabbed his shoulder and shoved him back into his chair. "Ah," Travis taunted. "Not until you apologize for being here. This square belongs to us. And we don't like your kind hanging around." Marcus looked up, his gaze steady despite the hostility pressing in around him. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice unwavering. "I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." A slow, cold smile stretched across Travis's face. "You've got guts, old man. I'll give you that." His tone turned lethal. "But guts don't mean squat when you're outnumbered." He gestured. And in an instant, Ricky lunged forward, snatching Marcus's guitar from his lap. "This piece of junk," he mocked, holding it up like a trophy. "You think this is gonna save anyone?" Then, with a loud, sickening crash, he slammed it onto the ground. Wood splintered. Strings snapped. Something inside me broke with it. I watched Marcus's face as his instrument, the one thing that gave voice to his fight, his purpose, lay in ruins. He didn't react. He didn't beg or plead. He just stared at the broken remains, his hands resting on his knees, his breathing controlled but heavy. And that was when I knew. The bikers had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. For a long, unbearable second, the world seemed to stop. Madison Square, once filled with music and light-hearted chatter, had fallen into a suffocating silence. All eyes were on Marcus, sitting still before the wreckage of his guitar, the only thing that had given him a voice that night. I watched his hands, rough, calloused, steady. They didn't shake. Not even as the jagged pieces of wood lay scattered at his feet. He didn't cry out. He didn't curse or lash out. He just sat there, his silence louder than any response he could have given. But his eyes, those weary, defiant eyes, told a different story. A storm brewed behind them. Not of rage, but of something far deeper. A grief that only a man who had lost too much could understand. The bikers, however, mistook his quiet for weakness. "Not so brave now." "Huh," Ricky taunted, kicking aside a fragment of the shattered guitar. The rest of the gang laughed, emboldened by the lack of resistance from the crowd. Travis stepped forward, towering over Marcus. "Now," he said, voice dripping with amusement, "you're gonna stand up, walk away, and not come back. Or I'll make sure next time. It's not just your guitar that gets broken." And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because just as Travis's fist clenched, just as he leaned in to deliver the final humiliation, a shadow shifted in the crowd. A presence. A force. I barely saw the movement before it happened. A hand, strong, unshaken, shot forward and caught Travis's wrist mid-swing. The grip was unyielding. An iron lock around his arm. The square, already quiet, turned deathly still. Slowly, Travis turned his head, eyes narrowing as he found himself face to face with Jake Carter. The ex-Marine. The wrestler. The man who had built a career out of standing tall when others backed down. I had seen him before. In the way that most people had on screens. In arenas. Larger than life. But seeing him here, in the flesh, standing between a violent gang and an unarmed old man, was something entirely different. His presence wasn't just commanding, it was absolute. Travis wrenched his arm, trying to pull free, but Jake's grip didn't budge. If anything, it tightened. "That's enough," Jake said, his voice steady, firm. Not a request, a command. Travis let out a short, scoffing laugh, though it was more defensive than amused. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled. Before Jake could answer, One of the younger bikers, Kyle, whispered something under his breath, something that made the others stiffen slightly. "That's Jake Carter," he said. "The wrestler." I saw the flicker of recognition in Travis's eyes. Just for a split second. Before he masked it with bravado. He let out another forced laugh. "A wrestler?" he sneered. Looking Jake up and down. "This ain't some choreographed fight. Buddy. This is real life." Jake didn't react. He didn't flinch. He just stared. His expression unreadable. "You're about to find out just how real it can get," he said. His voice like stone. And that was when the first punch was thrown. Not by Jake. By Duke. A massive swing aimed straight for Jake's head. It never landed. Jake sidestepped with effortless precision, catching Duke's arm mid-air and twisting it behind his back in a practiced, almost casual motion. The larger man let out a startled grunt as he was lifted off his feet and slammed onto the pavement in a clean, controlled takedown. The crowd gasped. A few even let out cheers, though most were still too stunned to process what they were seeing. The bikers hesitated. They hadn't expected this. But their pride, their need to save face, outweighed their common sense. "Take him down," Travis barked. Two more lunged at Jake. The first went for a wild swing, hoping to catch him off guard. Jake ducked under the blow and grabbed the attacker's waist, lifting him clean off the ground. In one smooth motion, he executed a flawless suplex, sending the biker sprawling. The second barely had time to react before Jake was on him, countering with a swift shoulder tackle that sent him crashing into a nearby trash can. The metallic clang echoing through the square. 3 down. The remaining bikers exchanged glances, their bravado faltering. Jake, still eerily calm, straightened. His movements weren't rushed or erratic, he was completely in control. "You sure you want to keep going?" he asked, his voice low, almost conversational. I could see it now, that moment of hesitation in Travis's eyes. The realization that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't the one holding the power. But pride is a dangerous thing. And Travis had too much of it. "All right. Tough guy," he spat, rolling his shoulders. "Let's see what you've got." He swung. And Jake dodged. Not just dodged, anticipated. Moved before Travis even knew what was happening. A quick sidestep. A sharp counter. And then a single, brutal strike, Jake's signature move. A powerful forearm to the jaw. It landed with precision. Travis staggered. His knees buckled. And then, like a tower crumbling, he hit the ground. The square went silent again. The remaining bikers, seeing their leader laid out on the pavement, did the only thing they could. They ran. They helped Travis to his feet, half dragging, half carrying him toward their bikes. No more bravado. No more sneers. Just stunned, shaken silence. Jake didn't chase them. He didn't need to. They were already beaten. And as their engines roared back to life, one by one, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind the broken remnants of their pride. Jake exhaled, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the confrontation. Then, without a word, he turned back to Marcus, back to the scattered bills and the shattered guitar. And in that moment, the real story began. The sound of the motorcycles faded into the night, leaving behind a strange, heavy stillness. Madison Square, once held hostage by fear, now felt different, lighter, as though the weight of intimidation had been lifted. The crowd that had once stood frozen in silence began to stir, whispers spreading like a slow-moving tide. I turned my gaze back to Marcus. He was still seated, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes locked on the shattered remains of his guitar, the instrument that had carried his music, his message, his hope, now nothing more than broken wood and snapped strings. Jake Carter crouched down, carefully picking up the largest fragments. His fingers brushed over the worn body of the guitar, pausing for a moment before he glanced up at Marcus. "I'm sorry." Jake said. His voice quiet. Sincere. Marcus inhaled deeply, but when he finally spoke, there was no anger. No despair, just quiet resilience. It's not the first thing I've lost, he said, shaking his head. And it won't be the last. His words carried a lifetime of understanding. A man who had seen hardship, who had weathered storms far worse than this, and still chose to keep going. Jake nodded, setting the broken pieces carefully beside the old man's chair. The moment should have been a solemn one, but then something unexpected happened. A voice, hesitant but determined, called out from the crowd. We should help him. The words sparked something like a match being struck in the dark. Another voice followed. Yeah, we can pitch in. And then another. Let's get him a new guitar. Momentum built quickly. A woman in a blue coat pulled out her wallet and stepped forward, placing a bill into Marcus's open guitar case. Another man, a father with a little girl on his shoulders, reached into his pocket and added more. Soon, others joined in, their hesitation melting away, their generosity outweighing whatever fear had kept them silent before. I watched as the guitar case, once emptied by cruelty, was now filling with kindness. Bills upon bills, coins clinking as they dropped inside. But it wasn't just money, people were stepping forward, offering words of encouragement, small gestures of solidarity. A young woman, phone in hand, approached Jake. Her eyes were alight with something between awe and urgency. I got the whole thing on video, she said breathlessly. The way you stood up to them. The way you took them down, it's already going viral. She turned the screen toward Jake, showing the growing number of views. Jake, ever steady, simply shook his head. This isn't about me, he said. Make sure the story focuses on him. He motioned toward Marcus, who was still watching everything unfold with a look of quiet disbelief. The woman nodded, her expression softening as she turned the camera toward Marcus instead. And then, as if the night hadn't already surprised us enough, a new figure emerged from the crowd. A shop owner, a middle-aged man in an apron, stepped forward. He carried something in his hands, something long, something wrapped carefully in cloth. I saw what happened, the man said, his voice firm yet kind. He kneeled beside Marcus and unwrapped the bundle. A guitar, brand new. The crowd gasped. And for the first time that night, Marcus's composure wavered. His fingers trembled as he reached out, as though he wasn't sure if the instrument was real. It's yours, the shop owner said simply. On the house. Marcus swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. His voice faltered. I don't know what to say. The shop owner smiled. Then don't say anything. Just play. A hush fell over the square as Marcus lifted the guitar into his lap, adjusting the strap with reverence. He strummed once, soft, testing. Then again, firmer. The sound was crisp, clean, unbroken. He played. The melody started slow, uncertain. But as his fingers found their rhythm, as the weight of the evening melted away, the song grew stronger. And with it, the square transformed. People clapped along. Some swayed. Some hummed. A child near the front laughed, dancing in small, uncoordinated twirls. The fear that had gripped Madison Square just minutes ago was gone, replaced by something far more powerful. Resilience. Community. Hope. Jake watched it all, standing a few steps back, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't seeking attention, wasn't basking in the moment. He was simply ensuring that the night ended the way it should, with Marcus's music reclaiming the space it was never meant to lose. As the last notes rang out, as the crowd erupted into applause, Marcus looked up, locking eyes with Jake. And in that moment, no words were needed. The fight had been won, not just by fists, but by something much stronger. As the night in Madison Square came to a close, the energy had shifted completely. What had begun as an evening of fear and hostility had transformed into a moment of unity, proving that kindness and resilience could stand against intimidation. Marcus sat with his new guitar, strumming softly, his music carrying the weight of the night's lessons, strength in the face of adversity, the power of community, and the impact of one person standing up when others won't. Jake Carter, having ensured that peace had been restored, stepped back into the shadows, his role fulfilled. He hadn't come looking for trouble, but when it found him, he made sure justice prevailed. As the square returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of what happened lingered, a reminder that courage, no matter how small, can change everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Life Stories for more inspiring videos.